Okay, so this is going to be a tutorial on how to render an interior elevation. And so with elevations, everything looks very flat because that's how we're drawing it, but with color pencils or markers, you can really create a 3D look. So this is what I've already done, and the left side is markers and the right side is pencils. And these are the colors that I used for pencils, and these are the colors that I used for markers. So it's not really a lot of colors. With color pencils, you kind of have to have more, but with markers, you can kind of blend and create the in-between shades. So just a lot of grays, and this represents white, but in order to create shadows, we kind of have to go darker than something actually is. So this is how we're going to start. I'm just going to demonstrate a little bit of each detail that we have to do, and then upload this so y'all can use this as an example. Okay, so I'm going to start with colored pencils, and I'm just going to write on here just so everybody knows. This will be the pencil side, and this will be the marker side. Okay, so for this is going to be kind of like the paneling that's really popular right now on the wall, and I want it to be bright white. So I'm going to use a cooler tone for my shading. So I'm going to use 20% cool gray to start out with. Okay. I'm just going to take this color, I'm going to very lightly start to shade in the sides. And again, just very, very light pressure. And I'm going to be even lighter as I kind of bring my pencil out a little bit towards the trim of the opening. Okay, now I'm going to go back again, the same thing, but I'm going to start pushing just a little bit harder towards this side. We're creating the shadow coming from this side. Again, pressing harder and then lighter as I go out to kind of give it a gradient. Again, we're trying to turn this one color into a lot of colors. So you kind of see how you're starting to get a gradient. I'm just taking it and kind of going up and down to make sure I have this darkest part. Again, light pressure as I go out. Okay, and since this is the kind of wall I have, if it was smooth I wouldn't do this, but I'm just going to take my pencil and hit under each panel to create kind of a shading effect, because in real life they do have a little bit of a thickness to them, so just gonna do that. But if you just have normal walls, then you wouldn't need to do this. And this is a skinnier panel that it's not part of the trim at the top. So I'm just going to kind of take my pencil line and go all the way under the trim. I was pretty medium pressure. It's going to be a little bit darker because it is underneath the trim, and the trim is going to cast a shadow on it. So now I'm going to take 50% cool gray, so 30% more. So it's just a little bit darker, and again, I'm going to do very light pressure because this is a darker color. I'm going to take it along the edges. And then again, I'm going to get very light as I kind of bring it out a little bit. Just like that. And I'm going to come under here. Okay. Now I'm going to take my blending pencil and I'm just going to take it and go along. And that just kind of makes it look a little bit smoother. Kind of gets rid of some of the harsh lines that happen when you are using colored pencils. And then I'm just going to repeat the same thing on this side. Again, starting with this. And also this time I have this comes out before this part of the wall. So right here is going to be pretty dark. So it's going to be darker than this corner because right now we don't have anything coming in front of this. So we need to make sure we convey the depth without having a 3D picture. We're having an elevation. So taking the 50% and I'm just going to darken along here. And I'm going to take the lightest color again. And I found that sometimes this helps you blend the darker color out. So if you don't have a blender, this is a good tip to use your lightest color to go back over it again once you've added your dark. And if you feel like you went too dark, you can always take a white colored pencil and go back in to add some of that lightness. I'm going to take the 50% one more time and just make sure I didn't lose too much of that. And again, so these are actually white, but we're creating the shadow and depth. Now I'm going to do the trim, which is going to consist of the same colors. So I'm going to start with 20%. And I'm going to start, I always start in the darkest parts. Even with light pressure, I just start in the two corners, and it's going to be white in the center, and because that's the true color of it. We're just kind of shading. So I like that. So now I'm going to keep making it darker. So I'm going to come closer back. Each time I get darker, I'm going to bring it closer in. Instead of going all the way out here, I'm going to go about here. And I just increase my pressure. And so these lines represent the trim going in and out. So I'm going to kind of go along these lines because technically they would be more shadowed than this part would be. So that's just a little detail that you can add. Now I'm going to go back to the 50% cool gray. I'm just going to add some more depth. And again, this is coming in front of this trim. So right here, it's going to be pretty dark. So I'm putting a lot of pressure. Okay, just like that. And now with this trim, I'm going to do it white also, but I'm going to do more of a warm tone white. So I'm going to use 20% warm gray. And this is just going to be very light. I don't really want too much color, but I'm going to go along the edge. And this really is just the same technique, just a different color. So I'm just going to kind of come in and like the trim, I'm going to go over the edges and leave the center white and create a gradient into the white through decreasing my pressure and then increasing it as I go into the corner. I'm going to do the same on these, but kind of up and down. Okay. Now I'm going to color this inside wall, and for that I'm going to use some of this 20% gray again, but to make it sort of a blue color, I'm going to add some of the cloud blue, and then to kind of create a little bit more depth, I'm going to take jade green. So I'm going to start with the 20% cool gray, and with big strokes I'm just going to start adding in some depth. And again, so if you think about it, this is like a hallway back here, it's further back, so we need to shade this in. Again, very light pressure, and then more pressure as I go here. And then I'm going to make sure to go underneath the painting to make it pop. So just like we did on the floor plan, create an L shape. You don't want to go all the way around the painting, but you want to go around two sides. So I'm going to choose those sides. And then for these, I'm just going to come in kind of like an L shape again. I'm going to come on two sides of these openings just like that. Now I'm going to take the cloud blue and I'm just going to do the same thing, and this is going to add kind of a blue tone to it. And so if your walls are very bright, say if they're like a dark green, I definitely would not color them in that color. I would kind of build up to it. So pretend mine are a dark blue, this is how I would do it. Even if they are very dark, it wouldn't read as well if you did it that dark. It looks better in a rendering to have things lighter. So now I'm going to add a little bit more of the jade green, and that's going to give a little bit more depth and just a little bit more color. I'm going to go back over this, and then also over this. Okay, so now let's talk about the painting. So this is a chance for you to bring in your colors, and just like the decor, it's a chance for you to bring in your color scheme. And so for mine, I'm doing kind of like a coral and a blue theme, with maybe some oranges. But for the painting, you can use the painting you chose as your inspiration, or you can just kind of color in some of your colors that you want to use. So I'm going to go in with peach, and I'm going to just kind of lightly, this is going to be kind of an abstract representation. You don't have to be exact because nobody expects you to be an artist and paint the painting that you're using as your inspiration. And so I'm just going to kind of go in with some of these colors. And then I'm going to take this one, and just maybe draw some lines in. Kind of like that. And that'll be it. And then I'll just do the frame. So I'm going to use a darker gray. So this is 50% French. And again, I'm going to leave the center kind of the lightest part, and the same for the top. Okay, so next we can start going over to the casework, the built-in casework. And I'm going to create another white, but it's going to be the warmer white like the trim was. So I'm going to start with the 20% warm gray instead of cool gray. And I'm going to say this is part of the trim. So I'm just going to hit one side of this lightly. And then, so for these, the easiest part really is this part because it's easy to shade. So what you're going to want to do is kind of give the inside of the cabinet a light wash of color. I like to focus it more on one side and kind of leave the lighter area at the bottom. And then you're going to take your pencil with more pressure and you're going to line two sides of it like that. And you see how that makes it pop. So again, just do a light wash and then take your pencil and go over the left side and then the top side. And then I'm going to go back over and just add a little bit more. So just like that. And then for these other parts, since they're so small, it's really just important to kind of give it an indication of the color. Where it will become important is in the bigger spaces. So for this space again, I'm going to leave this be white and come in from the corners with the color. And whatever I do here, however dark I make this part, I'm going to kind of bring it up and create a gradient so it's not just a line right here of dark and then light. And then it's also important to create a shadow underneath these cabinets, like this. And then we'll come up with the color. And then this counter probably needs a little bit of shadow underneath it, so I'm just going to take my pencil line and go along here. And you can repeat the same steps for these, just like that. And all I would do with these is just kind of hit them with some color. They don't need to be any darker than this, so just kind of hit it with just a little bit of color. And I'm going to add a little bit more depth, so I'm going to take the 50% French gray. I'm going to go in these corners again. I'm just going to add a little bit more depth. I'm going to come on either side of the cabinet and create a shadow line. And it's really important to have a sharp pencil when you're doing the little lines, especially at this scale. Okay, and then so this is kind of the underneath. It's going to be very dark. It's going to be what's behind the cabinet. So that's just going to be pretty dark like that. And then on these sides, you can just kind of treat them the same. Go back in with the lighter 20% warm gray. And since again this wall is coming out, make sure you have a sharp pencil. I'm going to take it and run it along this. If you're trying to draw a straight line, it's better to use your whole arm and kind of take it and go like this rather than go with your wrist. You have more stability when you take your arm and go like this rather than like this. Again, the fireplace comes out, so I'm just going to take this, go down, and create that shadow. So for the shelves, we're going to take the light color again, and we're going to just color in lightly all of this. And always get lighter as you go to the center of anything. And then I'm going to slowly start to increase that pressure. Okay, now once you've gotten to a point where pressing really hard with this light color isn't really changing the color, that's when you need to move to your next color. So I'm going to use the 50%. And I'm going to start deepening this up. And it's really important for it to be darker so that it indicates that it goes back. Just like that. And so you would just repeat that with all of these shelves. And the trim stays the same. So next we can go on to this, which is sort of repetitive. You just use, I'm going to use the same color. And again, you're going to do the light wash. And then you're going to select two sides to create your shadow. Just like that. And then just sort of hit these with a little bit of color. And then here, make sure you have a shadow here, and then kind of fade the color. Just like that. And the same goes for this. You're gonna kind of do a wash and get lighter, get darker back here. And then this area would be very dark because it's pretty far behind that jut out. So I'm going to take my darker color and go over that again. Just like that. And then again here, just simple, hit one side with a little bit of color. And now I'm going to go in with my barn sliding doors, and I'm going to use jade green. And I'm just going to start in the darkest places, so where you want your shadow. And then again, I'm going to try and keep this part lighter than the darker parts, or else it would just kind of blend together. And technically this part does come out just like the tiniest bit from that. So you want to kind of create that darker. I'm going to get a little bit of depth by making some parts darker, like this. And then I'm going to do the tile around the fireplace in this color also. I'm just going to take it and add a little bit of dimension on each side of it. And then underneath the trim right here, it's going to have a little bit of shadow. And I'm actually going to take it and kind of go closer and just kind of take my pencil and go along with your tile pattern. So mine's the herringbone, so I just kind of added like a little bit of depth on each little tile. Just like that. Okay, and then for this part, since it goes back pretty far, I'm still going to use the warm grays. I'm going to start out with the lightest warm gray, 20%, and I'm going to come in from the corner, start to do some shading. I'm going to go back to my deepest at the 50%. Okay, and especially for the darker colors, I would go back in with this blender, and you can kind of see how it just kind of smooths everything out. Okay, and then for the TV, to do stainless steel, you need different shades of grays. So I'm going to use this 50% cool gray, and I'm just going to kind of start adding a little bit of dimension in. And for stainless steel, it's a little bit different. You can just kind of add the darker and light where you want to. You don't have to be super precise with where you place it. I'm going to go ahead and add some of the warm, just a little bit, and then also some blue. And then I'm going to go in with my black. Just like that. I'm gonna leave the other half for marker. And then for the logs, I forgot to make sure color these areas in. And just as a base, I'm gonna start with this color. And again, with the logs, the same technique is kind of create a gradient. And then I'm gonna take just any brown and just add a little bit of a different color in there. Just like that. And then for the fire, I would just grab some random, like maybe a little bit of yellow, just be kind of light. And then just to kind of go with my theme, I'm gonna take some of the colors that I chose. So this is the peach that I'm going to use in some of my decor, and kind of add that in there. And then, let's see, I'm going to add some of the darker brown too. I don't want to go super red because I feel like it would be off with all of my light colors that I have. So I'm just going to kind of do like that. And you'll see in my other example, if you use red, how it looks. I'm going to take 70% French gray, and I'm just going to add a little bit more depth right in here. Okay. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of depth, more depth to the TV. I just felt like it needed a little bit more of this black. Stop. Okay. Oh, and then for this, I'm just gonna use my black very lightly and start to color this in. Using the same techniques that we've been using. Like that. And I think that's going to be it for color pencil. The only thing I just didn't finish, oh, the decor, yeah. So again, you'll just repeat the same technique for the shelves all the way up. And for this, so for the decor, like I said, that's where you can bring in your colors. So I'm going to use a little bit of light peach. And I mean, it doesn't take much. Just go in and hit, like I have some books. Books are great to bring in color. And for this, I'm going to shade it the same way that we've been shading. So choose one side as your darker side. And I'm going to add some more depth with this peach. And on a bigger scale, we would probably be a little bit more precise about the colors and how we blend them. And even like so on this vase, I can still do a little bit of blending, even though it won't be much. Because you always want to keep this light area, so you don't have much room to blend. Then I'm going to go in with the cloud blue and just hit some of these books. For the photo frames, I just like to kind of color in just a little bit to kind of give it something so it's not just white. And then for this is a good chance to show your shading by using a few different shades. I'm going with this light aqua, like that. And then with this, I'm just going to hit some more books. And I wouldn't try to make all of them a color because then it can kind of be overwhelming. So use some of your grays or some of these colors and add some neutral books in there. Okay, so that's probably it for the pencil side. Again, this is what it looks like on this side, on the finished one. So now I'm going to start with the rendering marker side, and I'm going to be kind of duplicating these same colors onto this side. And so we're going to start with the same with the wall, and I'm going to use Cool Gray and Ice Gray 3. I would like to use Ice Gray 1, but my Ice Gray 1 is dry, so we're going to be working with Cool Gray 1 and Ice Gray 3. And of course Blender. Can't work without that. So I'm going to take my blender and I'm just going to get this over here. And then I'm going to take my Cool Gray and I'm just again going to hit this side where I want the color to mostly be. I'm going to take my finger and kind of brush it out a little bit. I'm going to go back. I'm going to kind of start working in sections and moving the color while it's still wet. Just like that. And I'm going to take my blender again. And with rendering markers, you have to work really, really fast. So if I seem like I'm going really fast, I'm sorry, but like I have to I can't let it dry or else it'll mess up. So adding it and then quickly blending it out with my finger like that. And then you can, once you finish this, you can crop this when you put it in the computer so that you won't see any of these outside of the line marks, which is nice. And then I'm going to go back in with the blender. While I was talking, it kind of dried. And then I'm going to use the Ice Gray 3. And I'm just going to take it on its long side and kind of dot it on like that, and then use my finger to blend it out. So that just creates a little bit more depth. But rather than just going straight on with it all the way up, it would dry and I wouldn't get the chance to blend it as good. And then with the trim, I'm going to take my blender and go over the trim like that. And then take my Cool Gray one again. And I'm going to come in from the sides, and then I'm going to take my finger and drag like that. And same on the other side. And we'll go back over it. So now I'm going to take this Cool Gray, I'm going to make it wet, and then I'm going to take my Ice Gray, and I'm going to dot it on again, and I'm going to pull the color out with my finger. When you dot it on like this, it kind of gives you wiggle room to pull the color and to work with the color. Just like that. So on the other side, I can't do that because it's not wet anymore, so I'm going to go back in with the Cool Gray and make it wet again. And then go back in and add that. And again, don't worry about that because you can crop it out. So now that I have that, I'm going to go back with the thin tip and I'm going to add the Ice Gray again, and I'm going to kind of focus it like that. And And then once that dries, we can keep adding to create more depth. And then for the other side, again, it's the same process. Take that, and then take your cool gray or your ice gray one if you have it, and we'll go along this. So a lot of times I like to have them both in my hand like this because it's very quick. Okay. Now I'm gonna replace the blender with the Ice Gray 3, and again keeping both in my hand. I'm gonna take the thin tip. I'm just gonna kind of go along here, using my finger to quickly move the color once I place it down. Just like that. Okay, and then for the trim, I'm going to use Warm Gray 1 right here. And we're gonna take the blender over the trim and then take this. And since I've already touched this side a little bit with the color, I'm just gonna I'm gonna use this side. And that's really all you need for that. And then I'm going to use blender again and go over these. I'm going to go back over okay. I'm going to take my blender okay, so now we're going to do this part, and to kind of create this effect, I'm going to use, again I would do ice gray 1, but I'm just going to use cool gray 1, and then I'm going to use gray green. So to start, I'm going to use the cool gray 1, but I'm going to put my blender down onto one side. And then I'm going to take my cool gray, take it, and then blend with my finger. And then go back in with the blender. And kind of use circular motions. And go back in. Just like that. And back in with my blender, and I'm gonna add some of the gray green now. And again, like with the darker colors, I'm just going to tap some in and then quickly use my finger. I'm going to go back in with the blender. And just like that. I'm going to go into the other side now and do the same thing. I'm going to go around this painting before I forget. I'm gonna go back in with cool gray and lightly go over that to make sure I have a shadow line here. Just like that. And then inside of these squares, I'm just gonna hit it with a little bit of blender and then a little bit of cool gray. Like that. And then dab a little bit of gray green. And then I'm going to take cool gray in the skinny side and go back over this one more time. Okay. Now I'm going to do my art, and again, if you didn't watch the colored pencil part, this is a chance to either use the art that you chose and kind of demonstrate abstractly the colors of that, or you can use it as an opportunity to bring in colors from your color scheme that you're going for. So for me, I'm gonna go for a coral and a blue color scheme. So what I'm gonna do is do kind of like an abstract art based on those colors. I'm gonna take my blender, just go over that, and I'm gonna add in, see, oatmeal. Like that, just a little bit, and then I'm gonna take gray green and pull some of that in, and then I'm gonna do some pastel green as well, something like that. I'm gonna take my coral, which is more of a darker color, and maybe just add some little things like that. And then, so that would be my painting, and it would kind of help tie in my color scheme. And then for the frame, I'm going to use warm gray 1 and start to color that in. And then use warm gray 3. The grays are very great in terms of blending. Like, I didn't even put blender down and it's blending because the grays are very forgiving and they're wet, and so they move a lot more than the other colors. So I would highly advise to always start with a gray base if it is applicable for your situation, because it always helps blending. And then I'm going to do this part, which is just simple. I'm going to use this blender. I'm going to use warm gray 1 and use the skinny tip, since this is kind of a skinny part. I'm going to go along one side and use my finger to blend. Yep. And we'll go back in with my blender. I'm going to use the skinny side and go along that. Okay. Now I'm going to do this shelving unit, and I'm going to use warm gray again because I'm trying to convey a warmer tone, and I think it would look better, so it wouldn't all be the same. So I'm going to use this blender, and I'm going to show you how to do these. So I'm going to start with warm gray, and I'm going to take it and kind of give an overall wash. I would just kind of color like that and then bring it down. And then you're going to take your pen or your marker and go on 2 sides to create the shadow, like that. And I'm going to use warm gray 3 to get that depth, like that. And then for these parts, I'm just going to lightly take my warm gray 1 and go over those. And you would do the same thing on that one. For the rest of it, it's pretty simple. I'm going to go over this. You're going to want to create a gradient to the center here and leave the center white and have it be darker in these corners. I'm making this area darker because this wall comes out in front of it. And then same with underneath this cabinet, because this part would be out before this part. And then also under these cabinets needs to be a shadow, or the doors. I'm going to go in with my warm gray 3 and just do the same thing. Make sure I have that shadow line. And then I'm also going to make these corners darker. I'm going to start with my warm gray in each corner. And then I'm using that as a base to add in this. I'm just going to pull it with my finger. Like that. And then for here, it's going to be pretty dark. So I'm just going to take my warm gray 3 straight and go underneath here, like that. And then for the sides of the cabinetry, I'm going to go in my blender. Just add a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of warm gray 3 very carefully right along here. Because again, this wall right here comes in front of that, and I'm trying to create that feeling by giving it some shadow. I'm going to leave this lighter in the center and bring in color from the corners. Okay, and from here we're going to do the shelves, and behind the shelves is going to be pretty dark, so I'm going to go in with blender, and I'm going to start in the center and go out towards the corners, because we want the center to be the lightest area. So I'm going to take my warm gray, and then I want to pull it towards the center so that I create a shade that's lighter, that creates a gradient in between the white and the warm gray. I'm going to take a little bit right there so it kind of gives a shadow for the books. I'm going to keep adding this and then pulling. And each time I add some, I'm going to pull a little bit of a shorter amount, so I'm not going to go all the way like I was in the beginning. And then I'm going to add warm gray 3 to create more depth. And again, I'm not going to pull as far. We're getting the darkness closer and closer to the corner. And because the vase is going to have some shadow, we're going to do some warm gray right here. And then I'm just going to kind of keep layering this. I feel like I need more warm gray over here. Kind of see how that helped a little bit. Okay, and you're just going to do the same thing for all of these, and it'll end up looking like that. And then you'll repeat the same thing for these over here. And then also the same thing for the trim. So next we can do this, or let's do some of the fireplace. So again, it's very repetitive. We have this shape again that is pretty easy. We're just gonna take our blender and then take our warm gray 1, and we're gonna give a slight wash of color to that. And then also right here, and then really quickly here. And then we're gonna create that L shape again, like that. And then we're gonna add the warm gray 3. with the skinny tip, like that. I'm going to go back into warm gray 1 because I want to add some warm gray 3 here, but we need to make sure we can blend it out by adding the warm gray 1 first. And so then you would just kind of, it's the same technique on the bottom. Like that. And then we can work on the TV now. So stainless steel is it's a bunch of different shades of gray. So we're gonna get blender, get it wet, and then I'm gonna take cool gray 1 and kind of add it in like that. And I'm gonna take warm gray 1 and add it in along the same lines, and then some warm gray 3. I'm going to take my warm gray 1 and help blend this. Then I'm going to take ice gray and kind of go over that. And then I'm going to take my warm gray 60, because that's the darkest color that we have, and create more. And then I'm also just going to go around the television outside. We'll go back in with the warm gray 60. Okay, and then I'm gonna color this in, and I'm gonna use cool gray 1, and then I'm gonna add in just a little bit of gray green. One thing you can always do is you can go back with colored pencil and add light to the areas that got a little bit too dark. So like for this area, maybe I want to add some lightness back in here. And then I lost some lightness over here, so I'm just going to take my white and go along here. Like that. And then maybe on the photo frame, And you can take the colored pencil blender, if it got to colored pencil E. And then here, I'm going to add some lightness back. And this also goes the same for like, if you don't feel as comfortable with markers yet, if you want to add more depth using colored pencils, you can. I just wouldn't go too heavy with it, but say like, I want a little bit more depth right here, I can get a darker colored pencil and add. So I'm going to use 50% French gray. I'm just going to take it along here very lightly, just add a little bit, and then take my blender and kind of go in circular motions and blend that out, just like that. And you can do the same thing if you want more precision along this line and use a triangle and take your color pencil and go along here. But yeah, I think, so now we can move on to the decor. So again, this is a chance for you to bring in your color scheme that you've chosen. And so I'm just going to cover these in Blender. For the photo frames, I just kind of like to hit it on one side just a little bit so that it's not just white. And then I'm going to use oatmeal, and I'm just going to start to kind of color in a little. I'm going to go along these on one side to create that depth. And I'm going to go into the darker version of this, and I'm going to use coral and come back. And so this part is very quick. It's kind of just adding the little details. It shouldn't take you very long. With these vases, you can create the same shadow effect by going on one side, then adding a darker shade and coming on that. Just like that. And then same thing with like these longer areas where you have a chance to be able to show depth. You can. And then use some gray green. And then I wouldn't use like a crazy amount of colors. I would kind of go in with some gray so that everything isn't super bright. That's it. Oh, I forgot this part. You can just use some gray. And then a darker gray, whatever you think. I'm going to use a little bit of warm. Take it and just pull the color like that. And then I'm going to use warm gray 1 underneath this. And then warm gray 3. And then, so now's the time where you kind of like step back and you're like, where do I need a little bit more depth? And you can just kind of start adding that in little by little. I'll take my blender. Yeah, so I think that's probably good. I would maybe add just a little bit more depth along here, but as you start adding more depth in other places, you see where it's lacking, and so that's where you can kind of go back and keep adding and making your rendering even better. The more shadow and depth that you have, the more it's going to stand out on the page, and it's going to read really well. But yeah, so I hope this helped, and I hope y'all enjoy this, and thank you all for watching.